The crown prince fell in love with the mute girl who saved him and insisted on breaking off our engagement. I kindly advised him, the mute girl is alone and powerless, why not take her as a concubine first? Feeling humiliated, the mute girl took her own life in shame and anger. 10 years later, the first thing the crown prince did after securing the throne was to depose me as empress and exterminate my entire clan. This is what you owe Ruoruo. When I woke again. It was during my 16th birthday banquet. The person seated in the place of honor asked me what my wish was. May His Highness the Crown Prince and Lady Liu grow old together in harmony, united in heart forever. I bowed reverently. Your Majesty, please bestow this marriage upon them. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. I died on a snowy day. It could have waited until next spring, but Chu Heng couldn't wait any longer. The dagger pierced my chest inch by inch, blood soaking the entire bed. Still, his hatred remained unquenched. He twisted the hilt, making the cold blade churn through my flesh. I was in so much pain I could barely breathe, yet I still asked unwillingly, why? I didn't understand. We'd known each other since childhood, close friends since we were kids. For over a decade, my father and brothers served the monarch with loyalty and patriotism, giving him their full support. Before he consolidated imperial power, they had already surrendered their military authority and voluntarily accepted blame, yet he still fabricated a groundless charge to exterminate my entire Xie clan. Why, Chu Heng? I gripped his wrist with desperate force. Chu Heng's face was paler than the snow outside, and though it was he who had dealt the fatal blow, his expression made it seem as though I had wronged him. This is what you owe Ruoruo. He spoke through gritted teeth. Ruoruo, Liu Ruo. The memory was so distant that it took me some effort to recall that name, and the delicate, willow-like face that belonged to it. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. 10 years, all this time, Chu Heng had never forgotten her. He had actually blamed her death on me, on the entire Xie family. Chu Heng, you're truly a idiot. The last 2 words never left his mouth before Chu Heng had already drawn his dagger. Crimson blood splattered freely, a single drop landing beneath his tongue, metallic and sweet. Just like that year when my mother stayed up with bloodshot eyes to stew a bowl of bird's nest for me. Miss, is your heart aching again? The snow that fell like clouds vanished without a trace. The bone-chilling cold disappeared. The spring light is at its brightest, with people coming and going in bustling crowds. My 16th birthday banquet. Indeed, it must be that the heavens opened their eyes. I closed mine, then opened them again, and found myself miraculously alive. Not only alive, but returned to the year I was 16. This year, elder brother won a great victory in battle, and father made significant achievements in flood control. This year, I had not yet married Chu Heng. No wonder your heart aches. A mocking voice came from behind. Yesterday, the crown prince knelt all night at the gate of the Hall of Diligent Governance, demanding to annul his engagement with the minister's daughter. Hong Yang turned to rush over, but I stopped her. It's not just about breaking off the engagement with me. That year, Chu Heng encountered danger while suppressing bandits, fell off a cliff, and was rescued by a lone maiden. The maiden was beautiful and gentle. To save him, she tasted countless herbs, not only damaging her health but also losing her nightingale-like voice to poisoning. Deeply moved, Chu Heng brought her back to the palace, counting yesterday. I've been kneeling in the Hall of Diligent Governance for 3 days and nights. I will make her my crown princess. Young lady, don't listen to the idle gossip outside. You and His Highness the Crown Prince have been close since childhood. His Highness has always. I looked at Hong Yang and shook my head at her. The words of the wild goose abruptly ceased. Of course, I knew what she was about to say. 3 days ago, I awoke in the minister's residence. 3 days were enough for me to sort out my past and present lives. Miss, Hong Yang suddenly brightened her eyes and whispered. His Highness the Crown Prince is coming. I looked up to see Chu Heng approaching me through the crowd, dressed in his usual princely attire. The murmurs behind me instantly fell silent. Chu Heng and I grew up together, betrothed before I was even born. Whenever someone spoke ill of me in childhood, he was the first to stand up for me. When he made mistakes and faced punishment, I was the first to plead for leniency. Before this, no one would have doubted that I was Chu Heng's greatest love, the only candidate for crown princess. But today, on my 16th birthday, he brought another girl, Liu Ruo by, pale and slender, nestled beside him like a startled bird. Chu Heng knelt all night without showing the slightest fatigue. Instead, the corners of his lips curled into a smile as he whispered something intimately into her ear. She looked at me, her expression instantly turning panicked and flustered. Taking several large strides forward, with a thud, she knelt right in front of me. It was exactly the same as in my past life. Even that single tear clinging to her eyelashes, about to fall but not quite, was identical. In my past life, I was utterly deceived by her pitiful appearance, to the point where I genuinely schemed for her and Chu Heng, as a daughter of the Xie family. With my future husband being the crown prince, I never dared hope for one love for a lifetime. Her appearance brought a pang of bitterness to my heart. Yet I never lost the dignified bearing of a noble lady. When Chu Heng sought to break off our engagement, I didn't make a scene. Out of regard for our years of affection, I merely offered a few sincere words of advice. Miss Liu has no one to rely on in the capital, and with her physical shortcomings, even though it was to save you, the position of principal wife, I fear even if you were to kneel until your knees break, His Majesty would not permit it. Instead, it would only bring disaster upon her. Your Highness, why not settle for the next best option? First bring her into the Eastern Palace, and in the future, I spoke in veiled terms, isn't the future entirely up to your Highness to decide? With just these few words, she was spared from calamity, while I brought a world of trouble upon myself. Bang, bang, bang. In my past life, the moment I saw Liu Ruo kneel, I rushed over in haste to help her up. This time I just watched coldly as she actually started kowtowing to me without hesitation. Thud after thud, the sound reverberated loudly. Hongyang tugged at my sleeve. With so many guests today, all eyes were turning our way. I brushed her hand away. What's the hurry, Ruoruo? Chu Heng's expression had already darkened. In just that short moment, Liu Ruo's forehead was already bruised from the impact. With her glistening tears, she looked utterly pitiable. She glanced back at Chu Heng, then at me, bit her lip, and continued kowtowing. I leisurely picked up the teacup in my hand. Suddenly, I grew a bit curious. Just how far could she keep up the act? That's right, Liu Ruo was faking it. Her muteness was feigned, her pitiable demeanor was an act. And even her shameful suicide in her past life was nothing but a pretense. In the quiet, deserted corner of Chang'an Street, I heard her Oriole-like voice with my own ears. Weeping, she pleaded with a masked figure, Master, as a lone orphan girl, if I don't resort to some bitter stratagem, how would His Highness ever keep me in his thoughts? Master, I beg you, give me another dose of the death-simulating drug. Master, Ruoer truly admires the Crown Prince. I know my status, even being his concubine would be beyond my station, yet your Highness once promised me the position of principal wife. I must make some moves in this matter to ensure His Highness feels remorse toward me. Master, please grant Ruoer this wish, just one feigned death, and His Highness will remember his debt to me for the rest of his life. How well he can act. He deceived Chu Heng, he deceived me, he deceived all the dignitaries and nobles in Shangjing City. I once asked Chu Heng why he was so particularly fond of Liu Ruo. I was born the Crown Prince, and everyone fawned over me, flattered me, they respected me, loved me, all because of my title as Crown Prince. Even you, Shuyin, if I weren't the Crown Prince, would you still love me? This question left me speechless at the time. If he weren't the Crown Prince, I wouldn't have been betrothed to him, nor would we have grown up together. How could there be any question of love? Only Ruoruo, she was willing to give her life for me without knowing my identity. Shuyin, how could I resist such pure love? I was almost taken in by him. As a daughter of an aristocratic family, I've always thought 3 steps ahead with every move. I must consider my parents, consider my clan. I truly wouldn't easily sacrifice my life for one person. We've all overlooked another possibility. Even if Chu Heng were to fall off a cliff, his noble status would still be evident from his attire alone. Be it a young master, a noble heir, or the Crown Prince, Liu Ruo had made up her mind from the very beginning. She was determined to climb onto his lofty branch. Enough, Chu Heng snapped. Silence fell all around. Liu Ruo trembled violently, raising her head with trembling eyes that gazed at me imploringly. The meaning was unmistakable. She ruined my marriage prospects, making me the laughingstock of the capital, and now she's full of remorse. If I don't speak up, she'll never stop. Perfect. Then keep going. I raised my brows slightly and lowered my eyes to sip tea. Liu Ruo gritted her teeth and bent down to kowtow again. Chu Heng suddenly took 2 steps forward. Smack. He knocked the teacup from my hand with a swift motion. Xie Shuyin, don't go too far. Xie Shuyin, is this the dignity befitting the eldest daughter of the Xie family? Chu Heng's icy glare sent the surrounding servants to their knees in fear. He turned to pull Liu Ruo up, tenderly caressing her forehead as he demanded, Xie Shuyin, apologize now, and I shall pretend nothing ever happened. I almost burst out laughing. I was too naive back then. After catching Liu Ruo in the act, I wrote to Chu Heng that very night, telling him everything I had seen and heard. I warned him to keep an eye on Liu Ruo. The very next day, Liu Ruo was dead. She's truly dead. Rumors spread that she refused to become a concubine and took her own life in shame and anger. Chu Heng replied to me, thanks to Shuin's reminder. Those who deceived the sovereign deserve death. After that, the matter was laid to rest. For all those years, I thought it was him who turned the tables and killed Liu Ruo. After all, he had always hated being deceived the most, until the moment before death. Turns out, the one who deceived me he spoke of was me, Xie Shuyin. Have you lost your tongue? Ruoruo has done nothing wrong. It is I who wished to break off the engagement, apologize to her, and I shall overlook the injury on her forehead. I looked at Chu Heng and couldn't help but curl my lips slightly. I must be blind, to have always thought him wise and astute. Hongyang, is His Majesty in the front hall? I turned to look at the maid beside me. The wild goose nodded blankly. I lifted my skirt and walked forward. Chu Heng followed closely behind. What do you want to do? His Majesty is traveling incognito this time and hasn't summoned any female family members. Of course I knew. A mere birthday banquet for a minister's daughter like me wasn't enough to make the Emperor stoop to visit my residence in person. But why would His Majesty be here? Because both my elder brothers are stationed at the frontier, and news of their victories keeps pouring in. Because my father has just successfully managed flood control, earning widespread praise among the people. Because the Xie family has stood for 100 years. With most of the court's key officials having studied under its patronage, yet the Crown Prince knelt for 3 days and nights, demanding to break off our engagement. Your Majesty fears nothing more than disappointing the hearts of fathers and brothers. Even as the palace attendant announced my arrival, Chu Heng remained close behind me. Shuyin, don't presume upon your birthday to ask His Majesty for what isn't rightfully yours. I have already promised Ruoruo the position of principal wife. And I will never go back on my word. If you insist on marrying me, then you can only be a concubine. I turned back to glance at Chu Heng. As he said, he was born the Crown Prince. His entire life has been too smooth sailing. He had no idea what the position of Crown Princess meant to him, or who it truly represented. Perhaps my gaze was too icy, because Chu Heng froze for a moment. Just then, the Emperor spoke from his elevated seat. Shuyin, what urgent matter brings you before us? The hall was filled with guests. I kneeled down. Your Majesty, today is your humble subject's birthday. May I be so bold as to ask for a favor? The Crown Prince and Lady Liu share such deep affection forged through adversity. Your humble subject is truly envious. I fear I might disrupt their vow to grow old together in eternal harmony. Your Majesty, please annul the marriage contract between this humble subject and the Crown Prince. Bestow marriage upon these two. I knelt reverently upon the ground. The chamber fell so silent one could hear a pin drop. Before evening fell, the news had spread throughout the capital. The marriage between the Eastern Palace and the Xie family is likely to fall through. The Crown Prince's proposal to marry his life-saving benefactor had already caused quite a stir. Today, the Xie family's eldest daughter, long considered a model among noble families, actually requested the Emperor to annul the engagement during her own birthday banquet, in front of all the officials. It said the Crown Prince's expression at that moment was truly something to behold. His Majesty even directly denounced him as a rebellious son and hurled a teacup at him. Outrageous. I knelt on the ground, but still couldn't avoid being hit by a teacup. Who gave you the audacity to act so recklessly? My father's beard was practically bristling with rage, calling off the engagement. Marriage is a matter of parental orders and matchmakers' words. Since when is it a woman's place to interfere? You even dared to make a scene before His Majesty. I stood straight-backed, not batting an eyelid. The marriage was decreed by the late Emperor. Do you think you can just cancel it on a whim? You go straight to the palace and plead guilty. Say it was a moment of temper, that you spoke without thinking. No, I said firmly. No. What do you plan to do then? Break off the engagement? Divorce? Divorce? You want a divorce? Do you think anyone in this capital would dare marry you after this? I curled my lips slightly. That's not necessarily true. My father pointed at me. I think you're possessed by evil spirits. With that, he flung his sleeves and stormed out. I was truly bewitched. Had it not been for those past life experiences, I could never have done what I do now. From childhood, I was disciplined to follow rules meticulously. Forget about taking the initiative to break off an engagement in the past. I wouldn't even have appeared before so many male guests in the front hall. Yet following the rules meticulously brought no good outcome. For 100 years, the Xie family knew when to advance and when to retreat. when the court needed them. They charged forward with courage, when the court was stable, they withdrew from the torrent with bravery. Absolute loyalty earned them the absolute trust of successive monarchs. My father, my brothers, and uncles have always strictly adhered to our ancestral teachings. Thus, in the previous life, when Chu Heng showed the slightest intention, they didn't hesitate. Those in power relinquished it, those in office resigned, yet Chu Heng caught them completely off guard. The facts proved that absolute loyalty to a fool is called blind devotion. Miss, what did His Highness the Crown Prince say? Hong Yang was illiterate. While applying medicine to my knees, she leaned in eagerly, staring at the letter in my hand. In the past, Chu Heng and I often exchanged letters, pouring out endless heartfelt words. This time there were only 4 large characters. Enough is enough. I tugged at the corner of my lips and turned to the candlelight. Miss, Hong Yang grew anxious. Miss, if His Highness apologizes, just yield a little. I cut her off. Apart from the letter, was anything else delivered to me today? The wild goose was taken aback. Yes, there is. From the dressing case, she handed over a piece of white jade, and her eyes suddenly lit up. Today is the young lady's birthday. Could this also be from His Highness the Crown Prince? My eyes also brightened as I stood up and reached for my cloak. Miss, what's wrong with you these days? You're going out so late. Wait for me, Hong Yang, stay here. Closing the door, turning around, stepping forward. The me of these past few days is certainly no longer the me from before. The well-behaved Xie Shuyin from days past had long since died. What remained was only the rebellious Xie Shuyin. The man before her was slender and pale, yet the mole at the corner of his eye was a bewitching shade of red, quite different from how I remembered. I was sizing him up as he was sizing me up. His dark eyes were faint, seemingly indifferent. Miss Xie lives up to her reputation, graceful and beautiful. Her voice was like pearls falling. I smiled at him. The Crown Prince truly lives up to his reputation. With the noble quality of pine and cypress, the corners of his lips lifted slightly as he gave a very faint smile. Both were speaking formal pleasantries, each fully aware of the other's true meaning. The fruits Miss Xie sent the day before yesterday, he said, pushing the fruit platter forward. They've ripened. I unfolded the white jade in my palm. The Crown Prince's beautiful jade has been received. I picked up a melon from the basin. He reached for the jade. I closed my palm. His hand paused as I smiled at him. His name is Chu Yu, the eldest prince of His Majesty, and Chu Heng's elder brother. My father was right. The marriage contract between me and Chu Heng, bestowed by the late emperor, isn't something that can be annulled so easily. Yet I know all too well that this marriage must be called off. On the first day of my rebirth, I tossed and turned, searching my memories for this person. High status, excellent position, and most importantly, he died young. Strictly speaking, he was the emperor's legitimate eldest son. The throne should have been his. My betrothal should have been his. But his birth mother was frail and passed away shortly after giving birth to him. He too was sickly, and before he turned 1. The royal astrologer declared this child wouldn't live past 18. Thus, the Crown Prince's position was never meant for him. In his previous life, though he lived past 18, he barely managed 6 more years. Yet he clearly had ambition. He never married, had neither sons nor daughters. When he died, the wealth in his mansion exceeded half the national treasury. I dare not imagine what heights he might have reached had he lived a few more years, or enjoyed good health. What does Miss Xie mean by this? Chu Yu's dark eyes fixed on me. Xie Shuyin despises fools above all else, I said, raising an eyebrow at him. Before we form an alliance, let me see what you're capable of. Chu Yu laughed. This time it was a genuine smile, bringing a faint radiance to his pale face. Slowly raising the cup, he took a sip of tea. Secret dealings, for the former Xie Shuyin. This would have been unthinkable treachery. But I need an ally. Moreover, he was a wise ally. The capital remained tranquil. The rumors circulated for a few days before collapsing on their own. How could the marriage alliance between the Eastern Palace and the Xie family possibly fall through? The eldest daughter of the Xie family was destined to become the empress. If the Crown Prince wouldn't marry her, who else would dare? Chu Heng was quite pleased with himself. Since the emperor never showed him a pleasant expression, he simply took Liu Ruo on a spring hunt instead. He wasn't in the capital, so naturally he wouldn't notice the frequent transactions between merchant houses in just 1 short month, or even if he were in the capital, he wouldn't have paid it any mind. The Eastern Palace never lacked silver, and even if it did, the Xie family would make up the shortfall for him. He didn't notice the silent personnel changes happening in the Eastern Palace. After all, they were just maids and nannies, insignificant figures. Is that all? The correspondence between Chu Heng and me had now become exchanges between Chu Yu and me. The frail eldest prince spoke very little. He did not reply to this letter. Within a couple of days, a new play suddenly appeared in the capital. A noble young master was saved by an orphaned girl, and they pledged themselves to each other in secret. The orphan girl was of humble birth, while the noble young master came from an illustrious family that could never accept such a mistress of the house. Of course, in the end, the two broke through the shackles of convention to love and stay together. At the play's conclusion, the noble young master declared passionately, "What does it matter if she's common-born? Why can't a commoner become mistress of the house? To repay kindness is the act of a noble person. If one cannot be a noble person, how can one be the leader of a clan?" The plot of the play was so familiar that, as it became wildly popular, public opinion instantly erupted. Why can't a commoner become the mother of a nation? If the crown prince cannot even show gratitude for kindness, how can he become the ruler of a nation? The crown prince's decision to marry a mute woman reflects the virtue of a true gentleman. The crown prince should marry the mute woman, almost simultaneously. A wondrous sight suddenly appeared in the forest where the crown prince was hunting in spring. Hundreds of birds circled and chirped around the horse carrying the mute girl, 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. Thus when the crown prince returned to the capital, the common people lined the streets to welcome him. With the mute girl held before him, he rode forth in high spirits. That's quite clever, using public sentiment as leverage to force His Majesty to concede. Moreover, it kills 3 birds with 1 stone, cutting off Chu Heng's future path, sealing my father's retreat, and sowing discord between Chu Heng and His Majesty. What nonsense about all birds paying homage to the phoenix, just a trick to deceive the people. His Majesty would never suspect the reclusive Chu Yu, only believing these were all Chu Heng's doing. As for Chu Heng, in his excitement, he probably only felt heaven itself was aiding him. Well, not bad, is that all? I smiled. He had someone send out that piece of white jade. You throw a quince to me, I return a jade to you, not just in return, but to pledge our friendship forever. One more thing, Your Highness, why not press the advantage while we can? Miss Xie, have you made up your mind? Naturally, now that we've formed an alliance. There's no room for hesitation in this first move of our reborn lives. Chu Heng and Liu Ruo's ostentatious display earned them 3 full days of scolding from Hongyang. But Shameless was about the harshest insult she could muster. This time, not even rumors circulated in the capital. Everyone was certain that the marriage between the Xie family's eldest daughter and the crown prince would inevitably be called off. Just wait to see her make a fool of herself. Indeed, my engagement was called off, but they didn't get to see me become a laughingstock. It's said that on that day, the imperial palace was extraordinarily lively. Chu Heng brought along several literati who publicly supported the mute girl becoming a consort, witnesses of the 100 birds paying homage to the Phoenix event, and a few enlightened monks. A large group of people knelt solemnly at the entrance of the Hall of Diligent Governance. My father was the first to receive the news and hurried into the palace with several uncles and disciples. In the century-long history of the Xie family, never had they been so humiliated, Your Majesty. Since His Highness the Crown Prince has made up his mind, let us grant him his wish. We, your subjects, bear no resentment whatsoever. In grand procession, another row of officials knelt down. All this commotion and disgrace, just for a mute girl. His Majesty had already raged and fumed to his heart's content, but with matters having reached this point, even if he disagreed, there was nothing else to be done. Yet as the rumors in the capital said, who would dare marry the Xie family's eldest daughter, the one who had been betrothed to the crown prince for over a decade and whose family held half the court's influence, now that the engagement was broken, to ruin Xie Shuin's life like this? How could His Majesty ever face his loyal ministers again? Will the century-long harmony between the Xie family and the imperial family be shattered? At the height of the stalemate, an unexpected figure appeared. Actually, I had specifically sent Chu Yu a note that day: dress more handsomely, don't judge my father by his serious demeanor, appearances are most deceiving. Thus, when that man appeared in the rumors, his features were dashing, elegant as a painting, like a celestial being descended from the heavens. When he knelt down, the crowd finally reacted. This was the frail and sickly eldest prince who had lived in seclusion, nearly forgotten by the people, and when he spoke, his words were even more astonishing. Father, your son humbly requests to marry Xie Shuyin as his wife. A single word breaks the deadlock. His Majesty suddenly realized he had forgotten he still had a son, though frail in health. The prince had already lived past the court diviner's prophecy of 18 years. My father was startled to see how extraordinarily refined the eldest prince had become after years apart. Finding him far more pleasing to the eye than the crown prince who seemed bewitched, in the exchange of glances between the ruler and his minister, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Only the crown prince, it was said, wore an expression so vivid in that moment, so startled he nearly rose to his feet. Before he could speak, the emperor had already issued his decree. The betrothal contract between the Xie family's Shuyin and the crown prince was annulled, and she was instead bestowed in marriage to the eldest imperial prince. Additionally, the crown prince is granted permission to marry the mute girl Liu Ruo, with the wedding to be held on an auspicious day. This matter has thus come to an end. When I received the imperial decree, I felt a rare sense of joy. That the first move of my plan went so smoothly was beyond my expectations. This shows how important it is to choose the right allies. No sooner had the imperial decree been received than Chu Heng arrived, finally able to marry the beauty. Shouldn't he be busy being lover-dovey with Liu Ruo instead of coming here to ruin my mood? I issued a stern order: the crown prince and dogs are not allowed to enter. It's a pity only the wild geese in my courtyard dared shout these words at him. Chu Heng raged outside the courtyard walls. Xie Shuyin, I see you've gone mad. I came with good intentions to warn you. Chu Yu is nothing but a useless cripple. If you know what's good for you, you'd better find a way to call off the engagement, otherwise, you'll be crying your eyes out in the future. I was in such a good mood that I couldn't even be bothered to raise an eyebrow at him. Slowly, I unfolded the letter in my hand. When to make the second move? This ally of mine is indeed much more ambitious than the one outside. I picked up the pen and wrote, "No rush, let me show you a good show." Chu Heng actually said many things to me before he killed me. But it hurt too much at the time, so I can't remember most of it. One sentence stands out the most: if it weren't for you, if it weren't for your Xie family, Ruoruo and I could have grown old together. In this lifetime, there is no me, and no Xie family. I want to see how he and Liu Ruo will stay together till their hair turns white. In the side room, the fragrance of tea wafted gently. The epidemic outbreak in the south is a serious matter. It was originally a good thing for the crown prince to volunteer for disaster relief. But, is it appropriate to bring female family members? Why wouldn't it be? The mute girl, though the crown princess hasn't officially entered the household yet, all birds pay homage to the phoenix. She's heaven blessed. I've heard she even knows medicine. Who knows? She might bring blessings to the common people. Tea houses never lacked people discussing current affairs. Is this the good show you were talking about? The crown prince headed south to provide disaster relief, bringing along his mute betrothed. For a time, the city buzzed with gossip. I raised my eyebrows and sipped tea. Of course there was more to it. Such refined tea deserves better company. Lucky for you, someone's blind. Chu Yu suddenly laughed. I looked up. The man was indeed handsome, especially when smiling. That small mole at the corner of his eye held a peculiar charm. For months we'd often shared tea together, our conversations knowing when to advance and retreat, our interactions harmonious. Well, looking down, he was indeed quite gaunt. Noticing my gaze, Chu Yu glanced at my teacup and leaned forward to pour me some tea. A prince who engaged in commerce, yet carried the scent of ink about him. Unusually quiet today. He glanced at me while pouring tea. It's not that I'm quiet, I was thinking about Chu Heng's words. Chu Yu is nothing but a useless person. Hey. I grabbed his collar directly. Can you bear children? Chu Yu's eyelids trembled slightly. Slowly, he set down the teapot in his hand, lifting his gaze. His eyes were eerily calm, yet the mole at the corner of his eye burned crimson. He pinched my chin between his fingers. Want to try? I really did want to try. If Chu Yu couldn't conceive, wouldn't my entire scheme be for nothing? But no matter how unconventional I was, I couldn't possibly try it in a tea house. A month later, the play I invited Chu Yu to watch finally premiered. The crown prince went south to combat the epidemic, bringing along the mute girl he couldn't bear to part with. Unexpectedly, the mute girl contracted the plague and showed no signs of recovery. In his anxiety, the prince sent her back to the capital. The mute girl's return would have been unremarkable, but no one anticipated that the prince would return as well. The crown prince was drugged unconscious by the mute girl with a dose of medicine and brought back. His Highness is already showing symptoms. I was nearly dead myself. How could I leave him there to die? In her past life, Liu Ruo had tearfully pleaded her case on paper. A lonely girl who knew a few characters but had never received proper schooling. The crowd could only remain silent, while defeated generals must still hold their banners upright. The crown prince voluntarily requested to go to the epidemic area. Not only did he recklessly send the infected mute girl back to the capital, but he also abandoned everyone and fled himself. Moreover, the crown prince wasn't infected with the plague, it was merely a common cold, last time. This matter was suppressed by his father. The officials accompanying him to the epidemic area happened to be all his father's disciples. Before Chu Heng could even enter the city, his father had already received word. He intercepted them overnight and sent them back, ensuring the matter didn't leak. But in this lifetime, his father was unwilling to help him again. The moment Liu Ruo brought Chu Heng into the city, the capital erupted in an uproar. Countless verbal and written condemnations against the crown prince spread throughout the populace. His Majesty flew into a rage, furiously denouncing the crown prince for his misconduct and unworthiness of the position. In truth, public opinion can be swayed with enough silver, but such matters must never involve official treasury funds. The crown prince, realizing belatedly, discovered that over the past half-year, his private assets had either perished or been rendered useless. His personal treasury was completely empty, yet he couldn't bring himself to swallow his pride and ask anyone for money. All he could do was let the rumors continue to spread unchecked. Time to make the second move. I sent a message to Chu Yu. I was going to expose Liu Ruo's pretense of being mute. Chu Heng had always firmly believed that Liu Ruo's love for him was pure and flawless. In her previous life, when Liu Ruo brought him back to the capital, he merely sighed faintly afterward. Ruo just cares about me too much. In this lifetime, with no one to clean up his mess, I wonder if he could still utter such words now. Chu Yu had long since planted several maids and matrons in the Eastern Palace, with a little scheme. She made someone who was already eloquent speak up. Not a difficult task. I originally planned to make a fuss about the epidemic, just to scare her a bit. Who would have guessed that before I could even start scheming, someone walked right into the line of fire? It was said to have happened one evening. The crown prince has recently been scolded by the people, criticized by the officials, and reprimanded by his Majesty, leaving him utterly vexed and disheartened. He hasn't visited his beloved Ruoruo's courtyard for 5 consecutive days. The Eastern Palace is vast, featuring an artificial lake and an arched bridge. That night, Liu Ruo, as delicate as a willow swaying in the wind, sat on the stone railing of the arched bridge, weeping. She gestured to the crown prince. It was Ruoruo who was foolish. Ruoruo has implicated your highness. Ruoruo is willing to atone for this sin, your highness, in the next life. Ruoruo will repay your highness's deep affection. Plop, she jumped into the lake. His highness the crown prince was deeply devoted. Though such intense love often leads to an early grave, naturally, he followed closely behind. Yet whether it was because the timing was slightly off, or perhaps because the crown prince had always been blind to the truth, after floundering in the water for what felt like an eternity, he still failed to retrieve anyone. To make the act convincing, Liu Ruo genuinely couldn't swim. After flailing a few times, no rescuer came. At the critical moment, the instinct for survival took over, and she screamed hoarsely, "Help! Help! Your Highness! Your Highness! Ruoruo is here!" It was said that the crown prince's expression at that moment was quite a sight to behold. What a pity, he put on 3 spectacular performances, yet I missed every single one. After that, the Eastern Palace was either filled with angry shouts or heart-wrenching sobs. Within a few days, the commotion moved to the Hall of Diligent Governance. The crown prince knelt stubbornly on the ground. "Imperial father, I beg you to rescind your decree. I want to break off the engagement. My mother taught me from childhood that as a woman, especially one from a noble family, love is terrifying. When loving someone, give only 7 parts of your heart, keep 3 for yourself." As the crown prince, did no one teach Chu Heng? Perhaps not, or perhaps he was spoiled from childhood. Though the empress was a second wife, her delicate beauty captivated the emperor's exclusive favor. Before his Majesty, there was a bedridden eldest legitimate son, followed by several delicate princesses. It wasn't until Chu Heng turned 14 that another young prince was born. From birth, Chu Heng naturally occupied all the imperial resources. And he naturally assumed that everyone and everything should revolve around him. He would marry whomever he desired, and nothing could stop him. If he didn't wish to marry someone, no one could force him into it. The emperor was so enraged he nearly fainted, directly drawing the imperial sword. The whole city was in an uproar. He was the one who insisted on the marriage, with the wedding date imminent. Yet now he refused to go through with it. How would the common people view him? How would they regard this imperial decree from His Majesty? Of course, he didn't actually go through with the beheading, just gave him a few kicks and told him to scram. And so, Chu Heng scrammed his way right into my courtyard. At that moment, I had just finished testing with Chu Yu and had absolutely no desire to move, but there was no one left in the courtyard, and he pounded on the door so loudly it shook the heavens. When the door opened, I finally witnessed the spectacular display on His Highness the Crown Prince's face. To speak of Chu Yu, there was indeed some of that imperial sharpness unique to princes in his temperament. Seeing I was about to rise, he pressed against my neck and bit me twice. Chu Heng clearly saw it. His eyes held both shock and astonishment, with even a trace of something inscrutable, taking a long while before he found his voice. Shu Yin, you too. I adjusted my collar slightly and tilted my head to look at him. Tired of living by the rules, I just want to defy conventions. What's wrong with that? Chu Heng suddenly flared up in anger. You're still unmarried, have you no sense of shame? Such words are unbecoming of you, imperial brother. Just as I was about to speak, a voice like jade beads chimed from the inner chamber. You've already engaged in illicit relations with that mute girl without proper matchmaking. What's wrong with us? Chu Heng didn't expect the person to still be in my room, his face alternating between red and white. I'm not like my imperial brother, breaking off engagements today with this one, tomorrow with that one, the one I set my heart on, I keep for life. Chu Heng's face had drained of all color. And one more thing, Shu Yin is not for you to call. You should call her imperial sister-in-law. Chu Heng's lips trembled, but no words came out. I thought he was going to call her imperial sister-in-law. How dull. He closed the door with his arm. Shu Yin. Chu Heng blocked the door. Shu Yin. Liu Ruo deceived me. Shu Yin. It was her meddling that led us to this state. Shu Yin, listen to me. The other day I dreamed that it was clearly me marrying you. Madam. Chu Yu changed her form of address directly. The quilt is cold, and I have a weak constitution. I'm freezing. Your Highness the Crown Prince, would you like to go inside and speak with His Highness the eldest prince together? Chu Heng shut his mouth. I closed the door. Chu Heng, for reasons unknown, fell ill upon returning home, perhaps having suffered some severe shock. Neither the bustling activity of the Qingjing Hall nor the liveliness of the Eastern Palace could be witnessed anymore. Yet, with preparations underway for my grand wedding to Chu Yu, there was no time for idleness. On this particular day, as I was taking stock of my dowry, an unexpected visitor arrived. Liu Ruo knelt before me the moment she saw me. Weeping uncontrollably, Miss Xie, please go to the Eastern Palace to see His Highness. I sidestepped, barely avoiding her grasp as she nearly caught hold of my skirt. Miss Xie, His Highness is gravely ill, he won't wake no matter what. In his dreams, he keeps calling your name over and over. Go see him. Maybe he'll wake up. Hearing Liu Ruo's voice for the second time in 2 lifetimes, what a rare occurrence. I looked down at her with little interest in responding. Miss Xie, you and His Highness grew up together, please just go to the Eastern Palace. Liu Ruo began kowtowing again. It was this commoner's presumptuous wish. If only Miss Xie would agree. This commoner is willing to be a concubine. Miss Xie, this commoner begs you. I had just frowned when a cold rebuke sounded beside me. How are things being managed here? What kind of stray cats and dogs are being let into the manor? Ever since Hongyang called the Crown Prince a dog. She's been getting bolder and bolder. Steward, escort these guests out. Liu Ruo was driven out of the mansion and never allowed back in. It should have been an insignificant matter, but the more I pondered the meaning behind her words, the more something felt off. Chu Heng fell ill and called out my name. He's never shown me that much devotion. Moreover, last time he mentioned dreaming about marrying me. Could it be that my rebirth itself was strange? Nothing seems impossible anymore. But what if he remembers his past life? Where should I place my third move then? Back then, I boasted to Chu Yu that as long as he allied with me, it would take just 3 moves to reclaim what was rightfully his. After dying such a miserable death in my past life, there was no way I'd let Chu Heng remain comfortably as Crown Prince, let alone ascend the throne. I had people keeping watch on the Eastern Palace. Chu Heng had already awakened and appeared to be in normal condition. There were no significant incidents in the Eastern Palace either. The entrance to the Hall of Diligent Governance stood empty. Chu Heng no longer demanded the annulment of the engagement, but instead postponed his wedding date with Liu Ruo. This only made me more uneasy. Chu Heng's temperament was such that he would never give up until he achieved his goal. Could his postponement of the wedding date be because he too knew that the days were numbered? My third move was made on a certain night 1 month later. That night, His Majesty passed away silently in the autumn breeze. Since ancient times, the night of an emperor's passing has always been the most crucial night. But with Chu Heng, it was an exception. He had no competitors. In his previous life, His Majesty passed away in his sleep, and it wasn't until morning that the palace attendants discovered him. Chu Heng smoothly and uneventfully ascended to the throne, but in this lifetime, there was Chu Yu. I am here, as long as my third move is well placed and precise enough. Kicking Chu Heng out of the game won't be difficult. I prepared everything according to plan, had a heart-to-heart talk with my father, deliver the defense layout of the Chu Yu Imperial Palace, write letters to both elder brothers. The Eastern Palace remains completely normal as usual. Chu Heng attends court sessions as usual. While Liu Ruo continues to weep and wail, soon, a month had passed. When night fell, I handed Chu Heng a note. Midnight, by the moat. Chu Heng and I did share some beautiful memories after all. Before Liu Ruo appeared, Chu Heng would accompany me to release lanterns at the moat for every birthday of mine. In my childhood, unaware of shyness, I would always voice my wishes aloud. Within days, the things I desired would be sent over from the Eastern Palace. As I grew older and stopped speaking them, Chu Heng could still always learn about my preferences from those around me. When I arrived at the moat, he was already there. With just one glance, I knew my guess was correct. The Crown Prince, young and inexperienced, had a gaze entirely different from someone who'd been emperor for 10 years. Shuyin, it's been years since we last came here. He gazed at the murky moat. At this hour, naturally, there were no lanterns. I remember that year when you slipped down there. He pointed at a reef beneath the water, crying your eyes out in fright, and it was me who pulled you up. Your Highness has an excellent memory, I said with a smile. I don't recall it myself, so the moment you returned, you planned to stay away from me. Is that it? What else should I do? I shot him a sidelong glance. Wait for you to kill me again. Chu Heng's eyebrow twitched slightly. The voice lowered. Shuyin, I wronged you. It was the Chen family. Only when I pursued the Chen family did I learn that the little maid by Liu Ruo's side came from the Chen clan. After learning of her plan to fake her death, they switched her medicine and framed the Xie family. I trusted you, so I didn't save her in time, but she actually died. I didn't really want to hear it. There was something fishy about what happened back then. Anyone could tell without thinking. But what good would knowing the truth do? He had already done what shouldn't have been done. Even if she were to commit suicide out of shame and anger because I suggested you take her as a concubine, so what? I stared coldly at Chu Heng. Chu Heng, the decision to take her as a concubine lies in your hands. You saw that His Majesty firmly refused, and you wavered, didn't you? Yet because of a single well-intentioned suggestion from me, you would exterminate my entire clan. I thought, I don't want to hear it. The autumn wind rustled mournfully. Chu Heng gazed at me with sunken eyes, then suddenly smiled. I know where the problem lies. He dragged me forward and stopped before a large tree. He had actually brought Liu Ruo along as well. Her hands and feet were bound, her mouth gagged, tied to the tree trunk. Liu Ruo's eyes were already red from crying, and the moment she saw us, she let out a sob as tears began to fall once more. Those who deceive the sovereign shall die. In the blink of an eye, Chu Heng drew the sword from his waist. A single strike to the throat. This is the so-called beloved he kept professing. The person before me is likely more than just Chu Heng from 10 years later. When he killed me back then, his face was still pale. Today, he struck with his sword without batting an eye. I clenched my fists. Feel better now. Liu Ruo's eyes remained wide open. I averted my gaze. I know I was wrong, Shuyin. All these years, I've regretted it every single day. I built for you. Shut up. I didn't want to hear another word from him. Chu Heng's eyes darkened again. Then he laughed. At the third watch of the Cho hour, you were waiting for this moment, weren't you? The third watch of the Cho hour, the exact time when, in my past life, the imperial physician announced His Majesty's true moment of passing. Shuyin, do you think that without the Xie family, and by dragging along that useless Chu Yu, you can win? I'll make you witness with your own eyes who will emerge victorious tonight. Chu Heng pulled me onto his horse and galloped straight toward the imperial city. Just as we entered the city gates, a beam of light shot up from the direction of the palace, the signal flare used by the Eastern Palace, most likely informing him that the emperor had passed away. The horses charged through the palace gates as if entering unguarded territory. The imperial guards within the palace had already fallen under Chu Heng's control. The eunuchs inside the palace wore panicked expressions, kneeling at the sight of the horses. They had already witnessed the conflict. Before His Majesty's bedchamber, the ground was densely packed with people. The 10 guard divisions of the Eastern Palace had all emerged, mingled chaotically with the Imperial Forest Army, the capital garrison, and the Xie family army. Chu Heng pulled on the reins. And a thunderous cry erupted. Your Highness, the winner and loser were clear at a glance. Chu Yu had his neck restrained by 2 guards from the 10 Commandments office, my 2 brothers, who had traveled from afar. had their hands bound with blades pressed against their necks. The Xie family's soldiers all knelt on one knee. How utterly wretched. Chu Heng dismounted and reached out his hand to me. Come, my queen. I only gazed at him. Chu Heng extended his hand closer, his expression so devout. Shuyin, in this lifetime, I want you to be the happiest queen. I glanced at the densely packed crowd standing throughout the venue, then looked up at the moon in the sky, the most perfect moment imaginable. I looked at Chu Heng and tilted my head slightly. Did we win? Chu Heng frowned slightly, scanning his surroundings with a flicker of surprise in his eyes. The Xie family's forces were too few in number had they been discovered. Rebellious son. At that moment, a furious shout came from ahead. Who do you think you're calling Zhen, Imperial Wei? Chu Heng stared in disbelief at the figure standing at the chamber doors, clad in nothing but sleeping robes. Your Majesty. My third move was not actually disrupted by Chu Heng's rebirth, because I know that people always judge others by themselves, especially now that he has become such a cruel and bloodthirsty tyrant. In his eyes, this night must see me marshalling the full might of the Xie clan to seize the imperial palace, alter His Majesty's will, and place Chu Yu upon the throne. He wouldn't consider any other possibility, because he too is desperately awaiting this night, the night of his return to supremacy over all. But I won't let him have his way. From the very beginning, my third move was never about a palace coup. His Majesty was an excellent ruler, diligent in governance, loving his people as his own children, and showing both respect and reverence toward the Xie family. Since I knew he would pass away silently on this very night, why couldn't I have taken precautions earlier? Chu Heng had only been reborn for a month and might not know that, since more than half a year ago, the Emperor's health pulse had been checked 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. The medicinal decoctions used were also far more potent than before. In truth, the Emperor's health was much better than in his previous life. From the very beginning, I only wanted to make the Emperor grow suspicious of Chu Heng. The first move was like this, and so was the second. The third move was to create various illusions, making Chu Heng believe we intended to support Chu Yu and launch a palace coup. Once he took action, combined with His Majesty's accumulated grievances against him, deposing the Crown Prince would become inevitable, of course. Credit must be given to Liu Ruo here. Had it not been for her, I would never have known that such a marvel as the death-simulating drug existed in this world. We sought out her master and conducted several trials, confirming it was harmless to the body and could control the duration of feigned death through dosage adjustments. Thus, in the original plan, His Majesty was also supposed to feign death once tonight, when Chu Heng was reborn. The only extra thing I did was arrange to meet him by the moat. If he had been in the palace, he would have noticed early on that the numbers of the Xie family's troops didn't add up. To seize the palace, how could those numbers ever be enough? Of course, this night's palace coup also had the Emperor's cooperation. The Emperor trusted Father. Father said Chu Heng might harbor treacherous intentions, so it wouldn't hurt to test him. Thus, he decided to give it a try. Only he didn't know the drug would induce a false death, nor that this was all part of our unorthodox scheme. I saw Chu Heng again 3 months later in the imperial prison. As autumn turned to winter, snow began to fall from the sky. It was strikingly similar to the day I died. The prison cell was bitterly cold. Chu Heng had grown much thinner, his hands and feet shackled with iron chains, wearing only thin prisoner's clothes as he leaned against the corner. It shouldn't have ended this way in the first place, but he was reborn, and his methods of winning over the imperial guards and the capital garrison were ruthless. The Emperor was utterly disappointed in him, refusing to even glance his way on his deathbed. Yes, despite employing the finest imperial physicians and the most potent medicines, the Emperor's life was extended by merely 3 months. Hearing voices, Chu Heng looked up, then lowered his head again. Perhaps realizing the visitor was different from usual, he looked up once more. A glimmer of light shone in his eyes. As I entered the cell, he immediately stood up and moved closer, reaching out to grasp my hand. I dodged, leaving his hand frozen in midair. Shuyin, you still won't forgive me. I couldn't help it, I laughed again. Shuyin, after all the trouble we've gone through to return, this is heaven giving us a second chance. I don't quite see it that way. I maintained a 3-foot distance from him. Perhaps the reason we've all returned is that some grievances were too unjust to bear. Chu Heng's gaze dimmed once more. Chu Heng, do you know why after 10 years of marriage, I never once conceived? Chu Heng's gaze fell upon my abdomen. Because from the day I married you, my father gave me contraceptive herbs. The maternal relative's power is too great. It's not yet suitable to have children. It would be best to wait until our mission is accomplished before raising offspring. my father, my brothers, and my clansmen were all so loyal to him. But in truth, we once had a child. Chu Heng's pupils contracted sharply. When you killed me, I was already 3 months pregnant. Why didn't I tell you? Is that it? I stepped closer to him, raising my eyes to meet his gaze. Why should I bear your child? Chu Heng's complexion turned ashen inch by inch, his face revealing a rare expression of anguish. Chu Heng, I was truly worried you wouldn't come back. I'm afraid you'll think you died unjustly. I drew the dagger from my hand and cleanly plunged it into his chest. Chu Heng stared at me in shock, the pain on his face spreading to his eyes. I gazed at him quietly. This is what you owe me. The snow fell heavier, blanketing the palace path. Chu Yu was waiting for me outside. The path is slippery. He crouched down. I'll carry you. I climbed onto his back. Truth be told, he was quite thin, having just recovered from an illness recently. But honestly, I really didn't feel like walking by myself. His back wasn't particularly warm either, with only faint heat rising from the hollow of his neck, yet I leaned against it. Perhaps because we'd developed such seamless cooperation these days, or perhaps because he never once asked why. A few tears fell unbidden. He suddenly sighed. It's not like no one loves you. Is it possible that I earned all that silver just so you could become empress, to fill the national treasury and bring some stability? I immediately jumped down from his back. Hey, now that your goal is achieved, you're playing the emotional card with me, trying to make me soften and back down. Chu Yu rubbed his nose. You saw through me. On the day Chu Yu ascended the throne, he split the imperial seal in two, as agreed. They would jointly govern the realm and deliberate on state affairs together. But it seems I misjudged him. He didn't appear particularly enthusiastic about being emperor. First, he modestly claimed insufficient energy, promoted his father to regent, and delegated most state affairs to him. Later, he simply tossed that half of the imperial seal to me. I actually enjoy discussing matters with him. Speaking with someone who's sharp-minded is a pleasure. 6 months later, I became pregnant. He paid even less attention to court affairs, often staying wherever I was. Just ask him, he'll say his father-in-law is here, so don't worry, TSK. And I used to praise him for being ambitious. The child was born smoothly, a prince. Chu Yu was overjoyed, holding the baby all day without letting go. I wanted to directly crown him as the crown prince. I naturally thought of Chu Heng and shook my head. The following year, I considered expanding the imperial harem. After all, I couldn't possibly bear all the children alone. Could I? Chu Yu actually refused. Physically weak, he said, seriously, with how desperately he wanted to come even while sick, and now he's telling me he's physically weak. It doesn't matter if he disagrees. Anyway, as it turned out, I soon discovered that the half of the imperial seal he had tossed to me had been stealthily taken back by him. By the 3rd year, the child had learned to walk and speak. The palace gradually became filled with more laughter and joy. I began urging Chu Yu to attend court affairs. My father is getting old, how could he possibly handle everything himself? Truth be told, I don't have much interest in state affairs. I only want half the imperial seal. Once bitten, twice shy, that's all there is to it. By the 4th year, I was finally with child again. Time seems to have never passed so quickly before. Occasionally, Chu Yu would ask me, how many years do I have left to live? See, this person is quite shrewd. Not asking doesn't mean he can't discern my abnormalities. When he asked, I answered him, it'll be tomorrow. You know me, I've always been the most unconventional. In the 5th year, our second child was born, a little princess. Chu Yu's entire face was alight with joy as she suggested, if we're not establishing a crown prince, how about appointing a crown princess instead? I didn't want to humor him. In the 5th year, Chu Yu turned 25. Truth be told, she'd already lived 1 year longer than she had in her previous life. I actually felt no displeasure. After all, my original plan had been to keep the child and discard the father. Someone like Chu Yu, who didn't even require my personal intervention, was simply perfect for this. In the 5th year, Chu Yu took me to watch the sunrise. The moment the rosy dawn broke through the clouds, the entire capital was tranquil and serene. On our way down the mountain, I quietly tugged at his sleeve. Time stood still in perfect peace. Regardless of length, we seized the day. The end.